Hello, good morning. Hi. How's everyone today? Good. I'm so excited about today. When I get up here to give the speeches about these presentations, I always talk about these are Revolutionary Voices is a cross-curricular unit because it covers so many different subjects. It's social studies, it's history, it's a speech and drama unit, it's music, it's dance, it's writing, as you probably well know by now. But the thing I was thinking this morning is I was thinking about coming in here and I was feeling a little bit nervous about giving a speech in front of people. I was thinking, wait a minute, when I was a fourth grader at Jefferson Elementary, I was trying to imagine getting up here to give a speech in front of an audience like this, and it just made me feel so proud and excited about what these kids are going to do today, and all these kids in the coming days here in the front row. So that's the thing, I think amidst all of this, it's so much fun, but also it's just amazing to watch them get up and give these speeches and presentations. So I'm so excited. Without further ado, there's a bunch of kids waiting to come up here. Class 4A, 2023, Revolutionary Voices.
Washington, Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army and First President of the United States. I joined Virginia's militia when I was 20 years old and became a highly regarded soldier and leader. In addition to a successful military career, I was also elected to be a member of the Continental Congress. One day, when the Congress gathered to discuss matters of independence, John Adams suggested that I should be the leader of the Continental Army. Can you believe that? I was hesitant to lead the Continental Army because I thought my days in the military were behind me. I finally decided to join my fellow patriots in our fight for freedom because my country needed me. While I was a major in King George III's army during the French and Indian War, I was now his enemy and rival. As Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, I worked my hardest to defeat the British. During the Revolutionary War, the Continental Army had a hard time surviving the harsh winters. Our clothing had turned to rags, we didn't have shoes or warm clothing, and we were in need of basic supplies and food. My troops were no match for the British because England had thousands of more soldiers and all the supplies they needed. I needed hundreds, maybe thousands of men to join my army. We also needed training on how to fight an army like the British. I jumped to solve these problems by asking a German officer, Baron von Steuben, to train our soldiers and teach them how to work together in battle. Additionally, I made sure Benjamin Franklin asked the other countries to help support our efforts. I was sure France would be happy to fight their old enemy, and they were. On December 25th, 1776, the Continental Army, under my leadership, planned a surprise attack on the Hessians, the German soldiers hired to support the Redcoats. At about 11 o'clock p.m. on Christmas, we boarded our boats and began making our way across the half-frozen Delaware River. Over 2,000 soldiers and I successfully braved the icy and freezing river and reached the New Jersey side of the Delaware just before dawn. Unfortunately, 3,000 of our other men failed to reach the destination in time. With strength and determination, we continued on our mission. As the Hessian camp came into sight, we could see victory in our future. They were not expecting an attack on Christmas, so they were unarmed. The British also underestimated our army as a threat because there had been months of British victories leading up to this point. At approximately 8 o'clock a.m. on the morning of December 26th, we descended upon the unsuspecting Hessians. The Hessian defenders were groggy from their Christmas celebration from the night before and were not prepared to fight. By 9:30 a.m., we had the German camp completely surrounded and victory was ours. This was an important moment for me and the Continental Army because this victory lifted our spirits and gave us hope that we could win the War for Independence. After many retreats and victories, on October 19, 1781, the British finally surrendered at Yorktown. My troops were so happy that the war was over. I retired from the army and went back home to Mount Vernon and my wife Martha. I, George Washington, was always willing to help other people and fight for my country. I will always hope that there is peace and prosperity in the world. Thank you, America, for trusting me as your leader. Good morning, fellow patriots. I'm Sybil Ludington. If you don't know who I am, you're about to find out. I was born in New York on April 5th, 1761, and I am the daughter of Colonel Ludington, who was a member of the Continental Army. I have 8 siblings. Yes, 8. As you can imagine, they're always angels. Wink, wink. Luckily, I'm the oldest. I work hard helping my mother with chores and taking care of the other children. When I'm not taking care of my siblings, I help with spinning, knitting, weaving, and cooking. I also take care of my family's garden. Everything my family needed was right at home. I love to ride my horse. Her name is Star. Every day when I finish my chores, I will go out riding in the field with her. This is where my story begins. The night began with thunder, lightning, and rain. My family was very happy because my father had just returned from fighting in a battle. Suddenly we heard a knock on the door. There was a messenger, and he had a message for my father. The message was that 2,000 British soldiers were going to attack the town of Danbury, Connecticut. But there were no American soldiers nearby. Reaching General George Washington would take 2 days on horseback. Someone had to call the soldiers to action. My father couldn't go because he had to remain at home to give orders to his soldiers as they gathered. A new Star and I were up for the task. If we rode fast enough, we could reach Danbury and alert the soldiers. It was cold, wet, and dark. I was all by myself. The land was full of mysterious shapes and strange shadows. Then I saw a flicker of light. It was an American soldier's house. I banged fiercely on the door with a stick and yelled, "The British are burning down Danbury, Connecticut. Meet at Colonel Ludington's house." The word began to spread fast. I arrived home and saw 400 American soldiers gathered together ready to fight back against the British. A few weeks later, General George Washington came to my house to thank me personally for what I had done. A statue of mine in my bride was placed in Carmel, New York. Now you know my story, the brave and heroic ride of Sybil Leamington. Goodbye, fellow patriots. Greetings, fellow patriots and book lovers. My name is Phyllis Wheatley. I was one of the best-known poets during the 18th century and was the first published African-American poet. I was born in 1753 in West Africa. I was kidnapped at the age of 8 and brought to America on a ship. It was a difficult journey. When we finally reached Boston, we were able to see the sun again, and everything seemed okay. But just as quickly, our happiness disappeared once we realized we were being enslaved. Families were separated, and children and mothers were taken away from each other. It was a tragic day for me and so many others. I was enslaved to the Wheatley family. Mrs. Susanna Wheatley helped me learn to read and write and also taught me Latin, Greek, geography, and mathematics. I was only 13 years old when my first poem was published. It was so good that many people refused to believe that I had written it. My most famous poem was written for George Washington. It was titled, "To His Excellency General Washington." Here's an excerpt. "Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side of thy action. Like goodness guide, a crown, a mansion, a throne that shine, with gold and fading, Washington be thine." George Washington replied to my letter on February 28, 1776. He even addressed me as Miss Phyllis. Word traveled fast about my writing, and people wanted to hear my poetry, even King George. I was invited to Buckingham Palace, but before I had the chance to perform my poetry, I had to return by my Mistress Wheatley's side, as I received news that she was very, very sick. During the American Revolution, I used my writing talents as a model to all people who wanted equal rights and demonstrated the importance of having access to education. Thank you for listening to my monologue. You must excuse me, I have some poems to finish writing, so I must say goodbye for now. Hello, I'm John Adams. I was the first Vice President of the United States of America and the second President. Most people don't know this, but I was the first president in the White House. I was a father, a husband, and a leader, but never a fighter. I loved books and writing, and I attended Harvard for college. I was told I should be a lawyer, but first I needed money to do so. After I graduated college, I took a teaching job and saved up enough money to go to law school. I was a firm believer that everyone deserved representation in the court of law. When British soldiers were charged with a crime in the Boston Massacre, I represented them when no one would. I accomplished many things throughout my life, but perhaps the most important was my involvement in the colonies declaring their independence from Great Britain. I always believed that American colonists should not pay British taxes without proper representation in Parliament. I was invited to the first Continental Congress in Philadelphia, where I spoke to other representatives about the rights for the colonies. Originally, I was chosen to write the Declaration of Independence, but I nominated Thomas Jefferson instead, because he was a better writer and well-liked among the members of the Continental Congress. I was a key thought partner to Thomas Jefferson as the Declaration was written and revised. I gave a 2-hour speech where I said all men are equal to help encourage Congress to take a vote and pass the Declaration of Independence. After lots of conversation, Congress finally voted to declare independence. You may not know this, but I also played a role in George Washington becoming the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. When I was asked who I thought would do the best job, I said George Washington. Washington was hesitant at first, but I convinced him. During the war, I had to leave Abigail and the children to go to France to help get support and aid from other countries. During my time in France, Abigail and I wrote each other many letters. I would later go back to France to help negotiate the Treaty of Paris that ended the war.
Well, I must go now. Abigail's calling me. So are John Quincy, Nabby, Charles, and Thomas. My lovely children. Farewell, fellow patriots.
Greetings, fellow patriots. My name is Deborah Sanders, and I always had a sense of adventure. I always knew that women could do a lot of things, including fight in the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately, at the time, women weren't allowed to fight. They were supposed to stay home, take care of the children, and keep the house in order. I, however, decided to find a way to fight. One day, I decided to go to the store to buy men's clothes. When I got home, I started to put on the clothes and tie my hair. I practiced walking and talking like a man. And finally, spring came around. It was time to go to Boston to enlist in the army. I walked and walked and walked, and finally, my trail came to an end. I almost gave up, as half of me wanted to cry, and the other half was so frustrated that I had to do all of this just to fight for my country. On May 20th, 1782, I joined the army. I felt the honor of being a Continental soldier, as I put my name down as Robert Church. My first challenge was an extremely long march to West Point in New York. I had to walk with 50 other men, and I was worried someone would recognize me, and I was constantly worried someone would figure out my secret. When we got to West Point, they gave me a uniform and weapons. While one night sitting around the campfire, the enemies attacked. As I rode away, I felt my leg throbbing and I felt pain. One of the men rushed over to me and carried me to the nearest doctor. I couldn't tell the doctor there was a bullet in my leg because then they would find out who I really was. The only thing I could do was remove the bullet myself. Luckily, I found something in my pocket. I had to remove the bullet with a knife. A couple of weeks later, General Patterson chose me to be his personal orderly. It was his highest honor to serve him. But I knew I couldn't keep my secret no longer. As I walked up to General Patterson's office, my heart was pounding. When I walked in, I told him, I am who I am. Deborah Sampson and Robert Shurtleff, one and the same person. He was confused and didn't know what to believe. But it felt good to tell the truth. A couple of months later, I was discharged from the Army on October 25th, 1783, with an excellent record of service. I had my big adventure, and while it was time for me to settle down, I was still restless. I heard people wanted to hear my story and my life as Robert Shurtleff. And I wanted to inspire people, especially women, with my story. I started to travel to places like Boston, Providence, and New York to tell the tale of my adventures during the American Revolution. Farewell, fellow patriots. I hope my story inspires you to fight for what you believe in.
Greetings, fellow patriots. I'm Mary Ludwig Hayes, but you might know me as Molly Pitcher. I was born October 13th, 1754. At the age of 24, I helped the Continental Army win the Battle of Monmouth, the longest battle of the American Revolution. When my husband, William, left for the war, I wanted to fight as well. But unfortunately, women couldn't serve, so I tried to help in other ways. If it wasn't for me, Molly Pitcher, many soldiers would have died. One day on the battlefield, off in the distance, I saw my husband, William, collapse from the heat of the summer and the fine cannons. I swiftly grabbed the pitcher and ran to the springs. I filled up the pitcher and sprinted in a flash, like a lightning bolt, across the battlefield. I gave my husband and all the other soldiers the water they needed to continue fighting. Some of you may be wondering how I got the nickname Molly Pitcher. That's right, all from all the pitchers of water carried back and forth from the springs to the battlefield that day. Boom! Crash! The British cannons were firing all around us. Suddenly, I saw my husband, William, faint. No one was there to continue firing his cannon. I was worried about my husband, the soldiers, and their ability to fight back against the British. So I decided to take over the cannon myself. I put gunpowder in the cannon and loaded the cannonball. I looked at my husband, took a deep breath, and fired. And it kept going. It took all of my courage to keep on fighting. A cannonball exploded towards me, but only managed to rip my dress. I was determined to keep on fighting. I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as I took part in this key battle in the Revolutionary War. At the end of the day, the British retreated. Finally, we were able to rest. For my heroic role, General George Washington made me a non-commissioned officer. After that, I was widely known as Sergeant Molly and became a symbol of courage in the face of difficulty. That day, I fought for freedom. I proved to myself and the world, women can do anything.
Good morning, Patriots. Do any of you know if any of your ancestors were part of the Revolutionary War? And if so, what side were they on? Well, I was in the Revolutionary War. And let me tell you, it was quite an adventure. I'm James Forden, by the way. I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on September 2nd, 1766. My parents were Thomas and Sarah Forden. My father was a sailmaker, and as a boy I went to work with him. I always dreamed of being just like my father and being a sailmaker just like him. I was married to a woman named Charlotte, and I had 9 children. As you can imagine, it was quite chaotic. When I was 14, I wanted to do my part for my country during the war, so I boarded the Royal Lewis. My job was to bring gunpowder to the ship's cannons. Then, on October 8, 1781, my ship was captured by a large British ship, the Amphion. After being captured, I was worried I would end up enslaved and I'd never see home again. Even in the face of these challenges, I found hope in my lucky blue marble. I was friends with the captain of the Amphion's son, Henry Bazley. It's unlikely, huh? Me, a prisoner, and the captain of the ship's son, friends? Henry saw me looking at my favorite blue marble and asked me to play. After a couple of days of playing marbles with Henry and winning the games, Henry asked his father to watch us play marbles. Captain Bazley, Henry's father, thought I was exceptional at marbles, and he thought I was an exceptional man too. So he gave me a choice. This choice was especially hard for me. I could get traded onto the Jersey, a prisoner ship, the hard way, or the easy way, go to Great Britain with Henry to become an educated man. I chose the hard way because I'd been fighting for my country and I wanted my fellow prisoners' freedom, I wanted my country's freedom, and I wanted mine. Since I chose the hard way, Captain Bazley promised to put in a good word about me to the captain of the Jersey. When I got on the Jersey for the first time, it smelled of death and rotten food. While on board the ship, I helped a fellow prisoner, Daniel, escape. I knew Daniel wouldn't be able to survive his sickness on his own, so I told him about a plan I had, just in case I needed to escape. Listen closely while I tell you my plan. I told Daniel to climb into a man's trunk who was leaving the ship. Then, when that man had reached his destination, you could crawl up and successfully escape. He was hesitant at first, but I convinced him he should take advantage of this opportunity. After 5 whole months on the Jersey, the captain finally let me off the ship. I was so far from home that I'd do whatever I could to get home. I walked all the way from New York to Pennsylvania, barefoot. When I got home, I ran to find my mom. She squeezed me so tightly with the best welcome home hug. She was overjoyed that I was finally home. After the war, I went back to my father's sailmaking shop and pursued my dream to be a sailmaker. I became the wealthiest man in Philadelphia because of my father's business. At the same time, I helped the anti-slavery movement and funded the famous abolitionist newspaper, The Liberator. As you can see, I am a multitasker. I always had hope for the best in the worst situation, and mostly I had hoped to go back to my home, my birthplace, Philadelphia. I hope you enjoyed learning all about me, James Borden. Goodbye, fellow Americans.
We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Hello, fellow citizens. My name is Thomas Jefferson. I was born in Albemarle County, Virginia on April 13, 1743. I grew up in a 4-room wooden house and I had 7 siblings. It was a tough life in the Jefferson household. When I was a kid, I loved to read even with all the noise. When I was 9, I was sent to boarding school. While there, I studied Greek, Latin, and French. Once I grew older, I went to the College of William and Mary. While there, I studied science, math, literature, and history. After that, I studied law, but that's not all. I really love to build things. In fact, at age 27, I began building Monticello, my home. In Italian, Monticello means little mountain. I married a wonderful woman, Martha Will Skelton, and had 5 amazing children. I was a member of many groups, one of them being the Virginia House of Burgesses, another one the Virginia Committee of Correspondence, where we worked together to convince Americans to oppose British rule. In 1776, I traveled to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, as a delegate representing the colony of Virginia in the Second Continental Congress. It was there that I was nominated to write the Declaration of Independence. My fellow delegates decided I should write this important document based on my talented writing skills. I was very honored. It took me about 2 weeks to write this important piece of American history. I wrote this special declaration during my time in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. While writing, I wrote some of the most memorable words ever written. I started writing this in 1763 while King George was taxing people relentlessly. While on breaks, I would play my violin and would drink some tea. I asked my friends, members of the Continental Congress, Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, to help compose the first draft of the Declaration. Once I finished writing the Declaration of Independence, I felt so relieved. The Declaration was read on July 4th, 1776, now known as Independence Day. After the war, I was asked to be George Washington's Secretary of State. During my time in politics, I had famous disagreements with Alexander Hamilton about who should be making decisions, the government or the people. Finally, in 1793, I retired and returned to Monticello to build and invent machines. After George Washington left office, people thought that I should run in the election, even though I didn't want to. I ran against John Adams, and he won. I was offered the role of vice president, so naturally, I took it. Once Adams left office, I became the 3rd president of the United States. The Declaration of Independence remains one of the most influential documents in history, and my role in politics shaped America as a country after the war. Long live America, home of the free and land of liberty.
Others call me Joseph Byrne. I'm an Indigenous person who fought alongside the British during the Revolutionary War as an officer in the British Army. My Mohawk name translates to he who places 2 bets, or to 6 that are bound together for strength. The Mohawk people are called the Haudenosaunee culture. The English call us Iroquois. I was born in present-day Ohio in 1742 on the banks of the Muskingum River. My parents were Christians named Peter and Mark. My father died when I was young. I was only 16 years old when I participated in my first battle. In 1761, I was sent to Morse Charity School in Lebanon, Connecticut. While I was there, I learned how to read and write English and converted to Christianity.
In 1763, I left to work as an interpreter for Christian missionary. Later, I made plans to attend college in New York City, but fighting had broken out between Native American tribes and white settlers. There were anger toward Native Americans. I would not be safe at school. I traveled to England and asked the king for help in protecting Native American lands. Colonists were expanding westward into indigenous territories. While I was there, colonists were pushing for independence from England. I had to pick a side to fight for. Would I side with the British or the colonists? Here were the facts. The colonists were pushing my people off their land. The King of England promised that we would be able to remain on our lands. Eventually, I chose to support the British side. I led Native Americans in the Battle of Oriskany on August 6, 1777, and led a raid on a well-protected village called Cherry Valley. On November 11, 1778, I gained a reputation as a feared military leader. I chose to side with the British because the colonists were getting greedy with what they called their land. They kept moving west, but King George told me if he wins the war, he would not take my land. I thought it was a good deal, so I joined his side. Who would want their land taken away from them for no reason? I hope everybody enjoyed my story and understands why I, Joseph Brent, fought alongside a fellow loyalist in support of Great Britain and the King of England. The story is an important one to remember, a lesson in American history and a lesson in Mohawk people. I'm counting on you to not share my true identity. My name is James Armistead Lafayette. I worked for a Virginia tobacco farmer named William Armistead, who sold military supplies to the Patriots. I was also born an enslaved person, and I'm currently a double agent spying on the British. I decided to support the Patriots because I heard theories that people who were enslaved like me could be freed if we fought alongside the colonists. Once I joined the war, General Lafayette gave me a mission to become a double agent. This job was extremely risky because if I wasn't careful, I could be caught by either side. Even though I was helping the Continental Army, many of the soldiers did not know my alliances. My biggest accomplishment was tricking the British. In 1781, General Lafayette gave me a mission to become a Patriot spy, gain the trust of General Cornwallis, and sabotage his plans. I gained the trust of the British by disguising myself like an enslaved person who had run away, and then acting like a local tour guide. Once the British believed I was on their side, they asked me to spy on the French, which gave me amazing opportunities to report real information about the British Army's plans to the French. General Cornwallis believed me to be such a great source of information, but I was really feeding him false information. I had to be very careful traveling back and forth to the French camp in order to give them the information about what the British were planning to do. If I got caught by the French, they would think I was a redcoat, helping the British, when I was really on their side. Most of the time, when the French captured a redcoat,
there were harsh consequences. After many weeks of spying on the British, I finally guided Cornwallis and his troops to a fake destination where the French and Patriots armies could force the British in their surrender. When Cornwallis came to General Lafayette's camp to surrender, he saw me and finally realized whose side I was really on. When the war ended, I was devastated to learn that only soldiers, not spies, would be granted freedom. When General Lafayette heard of my story, he was furious and immediately wrote a letter on my behalf. He wrote, This is to certify that bearer by the name James has done essential services to me while I honor its command in this state. His intelligence from the enemy's camp were industrially collected and most faithfully delivered. He properly acquitted himself with some important commissions I gave him, and appears to be entitled for every reward his situation can admit of done under my hands. To honor General Lafayette, I changed my last name from Armistead to Lafayette. If I hadn't been spying on the British, the colonies may have never gained their independence from Great Britain. Now you know my story. I hope it's one you'll remember. Long live American freedom.
Hello, my name is Anna Strong, and my last name isn't Strong for nothing. I was the strongest woman in my time. I didn't exactly have huge muscles, but I will say, being determined was one of my strengths. But don't worry, I will tell you more about that later. My mind and determination was stronger than any other woman's in my time. Early in our marriage, my husband was sent to prison, and I was left at home with 6 children, including an infant. When British soldiers invaded our home, we had to leave and find shelter in a shopkeeper's home. Can you imagine facing all of this while a full-blown war was happening under your nose? Let me tell you all about what happened. My amazing story starts like this. My friend and neighbor Abraham asked me to become part of the famous Cooper spy ring during the Revolutionary War. I immediately accepted the invitation. The Cooper spy ring was tracking down the British at their every turn, and I knew the information they gathered was most helpful to General Washington and the Continental Army. Soon I was given my first mission. Abraham told me he had important information that needed to get to his son. His son was a spy and gave General Washington key information about what the British were doing, why they were doing it, and where they were. We needed to figure out how to get this information to General Washington. Having a strong and determined mind, I came up with a fabulous idea to use a laundry line. Who would be suspicious of a laundry line? I came up with signals using a black petticoat and handkerchiefs. Now listen closely. I'm letting you in on my secret. If a black petticoat was on the laundry line, this meant that Abraham had a message for his son. This is where the handkerchiefs come in. The number of handkerchiefs on the laundry line told Abraham's son where he should meet his father. They'd meet secretly in a cave at night and exchange the information. Have you ever wondered how the Patriots figured out Benedict Arnold was a traitor? You have me, my petticoats, and handkerchiefs to thank. This is where my amazing story comes to an end. Now you know what it was like to be a spy in the Revolutionary War. And remember, when you think of strength and determination, you should think of me.
Hi, I'm Mercy Otis Warren. I was born September 14, 1728. My father was a lawyer for the Massachusetts government. I always found working in the government and in politics to be exciting. As a child, I loved to read and write. I grew up during a time when women didn't go to school or have much of a voice, but I was determined to change that. My brother Jimmy went to school, and he would share his books about ancient Greece and Rome with me. We also read plays and poems. And then, of course, my personal favorite, The History of the World by Sir Walter Raleigh. This book was full of stories of cruel kings and greedy leaders. My time with Jeremy helped me learn so much about the world. My family wanted me to be a traditional wife and mother, but that is not what I wanted. When I grew up, I married my husband, James Warren. We lived in a house in Massachusetts with our 5 children. My life was pretty normal, but I had a secret life. When my children were asleep, I would write poems about the revolution. I would never sign my name because I knew no one would approve a woman writer. After the Boston Tea Party, I wrote one of my most famous poems, The Squabble of the Sea Nimbus. I wrote poems to explain what was happening in the colonies in a new way. I wrote to show what was right and what was wrong, and what life would be like without being unfairly ruled by a king. I was told that women couldn't speak or write about politics, but all of that changed when one of my political plays showed up on the Boston papers. In this play, I cast my patriot friends as the heroes, and my loyalist enemies as the villains, like names like Simple Sapling and Hum Humbug. I'm sure you can imagine who was not pleased with the political plays. Luckily, they didn't know who to blame since I published my work anonymously. It wasn't until 1805, at the age of 77, that I published and signed my name to 3 volumes of books and more than 1,000 pages. That people knew about my writing and what women could do. As I most famously published, the rights of the individual should be the primary object of all governments. I was proud to give a woman a voice and role in politics during this important period in American history. Long live American independence.
Bonjour. Je m'appelle Lafayette. Oh, sorry about that. I forgot I was in America. Let me introduce myself again. Greetings, fellow patriots. My name is Marquis de Lafayette. I was born on September 6, 1757. And when I was just 2 years old, my dad died and my mom moved away. I was left with my grandfather, and I loved him dearly, and I loved living in France. I had so much freedom living with my grandfather, and I enjoyed my childhood. Then, when I was 10, I moved back to live with my mother, but 2 years later, she passed away. I moved back to live with my grandfather, and sadly, he died weeks later. It was a difficult time for me, and I went to live in the orphanage. Joining a military was a family tradition, and all of the men in my family fought in wars. When the time came, when I was 13, I decided to fight for America because the British killed my father, and I wanted revenge. I boarded a ship and took a nearly 2-month journey across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in South Carolina. My first battle was Brandywine, and I led 2,200 soldiers. I was shot in the leg, and George Washington asked his personal doctor to take care of me. I also played a key role in the Battle of Yorktown. In 1781, in Virginia, I came up with the plan to surround the British forces at Yorktown. My men and I held the British until we had backup for General Washington and his troops. Eventually, we forced the British to surrender. Yorktown was the last battle of the Revolutionary War. Being a skilled soldier was not my only strength. I also helped write the Declarations of the Rights of Man for my country, France, which was inspired by the Declaration of Independence. I was put in prison for my views and beliefs. I spent my days all alone in a cell. My son was sent into hiding, and shortly after, my wife, Adrienne, was sent to jail for speaking out against the government. Our daughters were placed under house arrest, but my family was not forgotten by America. The people I had helped in the war tried to get us out of France. After my wife was released from prison, she visited me in jail. Without me in such horrible conditions, she refused to leave me there, and so generously moved into the cell next to mine. 5 years later, I was set free. After my performances in the battles of Brandywine and Yorktown, I was awarded the title Hero of Two Worlds, France and America. Today, many streets and towns are named after me. I'm afraid I must go now. I'm expected to attend an important party celebrating the anniversary of America's independence. Farewell for now. Vive l'Amérique!
Greetings, I'm Abigail Adams. I always fought for the rights of women. When my husband John Adams was attending the First Continental Congress, I wrote home one of my most famous letters. I long to hear that you've declared an independency. And by the way, the new code of laws, I desire to remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. Do not put such unlimited power into the hands of husbands. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. I was born in Weymouth, Massachusetts, on November 22nd, 1744. Because women were unable to go to school, I was taught to read and write by my mother. I also read nearly every book in my father's large library. After John Adams and I married in 1764, we had 6 children, but only 4 survived till adulthood. My husband John was the first vice president and also the second president of the United States. My son John Quincy Adams was the 6th president of the United States. I love my family, but I am also a strong believer in fair laws for women, such as allowing us to keep money we earn instead of giving all of it to our husbands. I also believe in education for women. I felt fortunate to have been provided an education by my mother. As the First Lady, I had a platform to speak on behalf of women and I campaigned for women's rights. During the Revolutionary War, I made sure to do my part to support the war effort. After the Patriots lost the Battle of Lexington and Concord, I helped train soldiers in mounts of pewter utensils and mold them into musket balls for our militiamen. I was inspired by the Declaration of Independence and sent letters to John very often while he was away. I was a key influence in his life, and he asked me for advice in every matter. I wanted to make sure that women were treated fairly in our new nation. John showed me as George Washington. Some people even called me Mrs. President because I had such strong political opinions. Would you believe that I wrote over 3,000 letters in my lifetime? In fact, these letters were later collected and published. Historians study them today to better understand what life was like during this period of American history. But before I go, I want to remind you, strength. Keep fighting for women's rights, and always remember the ladies.
I, Elizabeth Freeman, also known as Muppet, helped abolish slavery in Massachusetts. I was an important freedom fighter during and after the Revolutionary War. When I was enslaved as a child, I didn't have a last name. People called me Betty, Bet, or Muppet. Colonel John Ashley, the wealthiest man in Sheffield, Massachusetts, owned the land where I lived. I also had a daughter named Lizzie, whom I loved very much, and unfortunately, she was also an enslaved person. When I worked indoors, I usually would be cooking, scrubbing the dishes, and mopping the floor. When I was outdoors, I would be working on the farm or fixing a house. It was a lot of hard work, and the Ashleys were often cruel to me and my daughter. One day in 1773, I overheard Colonel Ashley speaking about human rights. Later, the town held a meeting to discuss the Massachusetts Constitution, and I heard the following words: mankind and state, nature are equal, free, and independent of each other, and have a right to the undisturbed enjoyment of their lives, their liberty and property. Surely this should apply to me as well, even as an enslaved black woman. I spoke to Mr. Theodore Cedric, a young lawyer, and told him I had a right to be free. I pointed out that the new Constitution stated that all people are born free and equal. Mr. Cedric helped me take my case to court in the town of Great Barrington. My case, Brom and Brett vs. Ashley, was argued before court, and we won. My daughter and I were the first enslaved African Americans to be freed under the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. Ultimately, my case led to the abolition of slavery in the entire state, which helped others also gain their freedom. Later, I worked as a prominent healer, midwife, and nurse. I died in 1829, a free woman surrounded by children and grandchildren, in the free state of Massachusetts, which I had helped create. One of my great-grandchildren was a W.E.B. Du Bois, born in the very town where my historic case was argued. It was because of my courage and determination that the institution of slavery was finally abolished in Massachusetts. In my honor, people celebrate Elizabeth Freeman Day in Massachusetts every year on August 21st, the day my freedom was won. right place. I'm here for Prince Harry's book release party. Who am I? Don't be silly. You know who I am. All right, okay, fine. I usually don't do this sort of thing, but I'm kind of famous. Why, yes, I'm King George the Third. As my former subjects, you may have complicated feelings about me, but as long as you refer to me as Your Royal Highness or Sir, we're okay. I was born into the royal family on June 4th, 1738. My grandfather was king at the time. When my father Frederick died, his final wish was that I became a splendid and beloved king. On October 25th, 1760, at the age of 22, I was crowned king of the British Empire. Despite what you may have heard, I was indeed a great king, at least by my estimation. Why did the colonists conveniently forget the part where I won the French and Indian War? But we were nearly bankrupt from it. And let's remember, the whole reason we had colonies in the first place to give their mother country, me, money and profit. So what was I to do? The only option was to tax the colonists. And to my credit, I tried different taxes. But would you believe it? Those colonists weren't happy with any of my taxes. First up, the Sugar Act, a simple tax on sugar. Pretty fair in my opinion. I mean, how much sugar are they eating anyway? Next, the Stamp Act. I imposed taxes on paper goods. The colonists protested, so being the kind and generous king that I am, I repealed it in 1766. So anyway, I introduced new taxes on imported goods, like tea, a year later in 1767. The colonists were very mad, and rumbles of rebellion began. In 1773, a bunch of silly little men dressed up in silly little costumes and threw a party on a boat, throwing 45 tons of imported British tea into the Boston Harbor. They were protesting my taxes and undermining my authority. Quite rude. I responded with the so-called Intolerable Acts, which included closing all Boston sports until the damage from the tea time party had been repaid. War officials in the colonies feared for their lives. I sent 4 British regiments to restore law and order to Boston and to the colonies. Eventually, war broke out. The following years were a blur. Sometimes we were up, sometimes we were down. Who were the winners? Who were the losers? I couldn't say. Really, no one can. Emotionally speaking, there are no winners when it comes to a war, but in the end, the Continental Army prevailed, led by that commander, John Washington, or whatnot. It makes me depressed just thinking about it. Now I'm known as the king who lost America. That's pretty dramatic, don't you think? Farewell, my former subjects. Send Prince Harry my regards.
What a fun Tuesday morning. Not only is it Valentine's Day, but you have treated us to the gift of this live performance. Weren't they wonderful? Girls, your teachers and I our hearts are filled with pride watching you up there this morning, speaking so confidently in your Marymount voices. And I know how hard you've worked since Christmas break, reading all about your historical characters and bringing those to life for us today. You were wonderful. And I also want to acknowledge all of the wonderful teachers who guided the girls through this unit, and not only in art with Mr. Milroy and Miss Lilligren, but also in dance and music with Miss Gunther and Miss Garcia, and also all of the homeroom teachers and our speech teachers, Miss Hickey, who is in the back, Mr. Madden, and our wonderful Miss Becker in front. So thank you all. When we return to the classroom, we have a sweet treat for the girls, not only for Valentine's Day, but for the special performance today. But before we go any further, I want to make sure that we have a photo opportunity. We'll have the photographer come up from the front to get a group shot, and then we will cheer you out. Mrs. Alva, if you would.
Well, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Wasn't that a special treat? I can just imagine what kind of speakers and actors and dancers and singers we will have the next time around. We may even be able to do it in the big theater. How about that in the new building? But thank you, dear parents, for entrusting your children to us. They are in excellent hands, learning, growing, living, loving, and just being a fourth grader. All right, we will not rush their growing years. We want to enjoy them every year with special treats. And of course, the leader of the department, Miss Farrell, come on, stand up. Every single detail and every piece of this performance, she has rehearsed in her head. She knows exactly what to expect. So thank you. Thank you, Miss Farrell. You are the heart of the lower middle school. Thank you so much.